Welcome to the Coach's Hot Seat Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Coach's Hot Seat Podcast with Mark Haines, where we track pressure across college football, from coaching hires to buyouts to the decisions that shape entire programs. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today, Mark and I are talking about how to evaluate a new head coach before they ever coach a game. Mark, how are you?
Great, Sean. It's great to be with you today.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I'm interested in your take on this. You know, when a new head coach is hired, what do you look at first to decide, whether the move actually makes sense?
Well, like everyone else, I look at the win-loss record. That's the number one thing everyone looks at. But I don't really trust that all on its own. Someone could go 10-3 at a Group 5 school and look like a genius, but when you dig in, half of those wins came against teams that couldn't beat a JV squad. So the number alone doesn't mean what people think it means. What I want to know is how a coach performed against comparable or better talent. Did he win the games he was supposed to win or lose? How does he perform against top 25 teams? How does his team perform towards the end of the season? How does he perform against rivals? Those all tell you something that just a win-loss record alone won't tell you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, in a good way now. There's so much data available too, in terms of looking at these kinds of looking at the situation from different angles, different lenses. It's pretty cool. How much weight do you put on overall win-loss record compared to who those wins came against? It sounds like you're taking that into consideration.
Yeah, we do. We do a pretty deep dive on that against, who the opponents were that those wins came against and what kind of talent did the opponents play. So, is it a beefy team or is it one that's just puffed up by a lot of wins that anyone could have had?
Mm-hmm.
And the one that really, the record that really sticks out to me that really is an indicator is performance against top 25 teams. So there is a coach who was hired in this last cycle whose record against top 25 teams is 30%, and he's going to one of the two power conferences, and I really wonder what that's going to look like.
You're talking about getting behind the numbers, but what about the coaching resume? What parts of it tend to matter most when because you're in this like future telling crystal ball situation, right? So what tends to matter most when you're projecting success for a new program or at a new program?
Well, there's a couple things that jump off the page. First, has this coach ever built in something? Not inherited it, he built it himself.
Yeah.
So there's a massive difference between a guy who walked into a loaded roster and a guy who took over a program picking last in the conference and got to a bowl game in 3 years. Second, I want to look at staff building ability. Show me the hires. Yeah. The coordinators a head coach surrounds themselves will tell you more about his ceiling than anything on his own resume. And third, the one that gets overlooked, I want to know if he's ever had to manage a crisis, a losing streak, a scandal, a roster exodus.
Yeah.
College football is a 12-month pressure cooker now, and if a coach has never navigated real adversity, you're basically hoping he figures it out on the job at your school, and that's a pretty expensive experiment.
Yeah, it's that that classic job interview. Tell me, interview question. Tell me about a time when you had the wheels came off. How did you handle it, right? And so, ideally, there's a coach with a track record in that kind of lived experience. Huh?
Particularly if you're in a hot media market, you're in a market where the media is really, difficult to deal with. You're in a Philadelphia market or you're in a Chicago market. The media is not going to let you off. And so if you've been able to navigate something in a market like that, that tells me a lot about you.
Right. Yeah. Those are real pressure cooker markets. They love their sports teams, not just in football. What was I gonna? Oh, I'm thinking about just like the personality, disposition. How much does that come into play when you're looking at when you're doing speaking of like beyond the resume? How much of that's a factor?
It depends on it depends on what you're looking for is fit. So
Yeah.
you can have a fiery personality and you've got a fiery fan base, and those two will probably do well together, right?
Okay.
You've got a little more, you know, finesse fan base, and you got a fiery coach who just, will tell people off in a moment. Might not work really well.
Yeah.
So you got to look at the fit with the culture that you're in. And, you got to ask yourself a question. What problem am I hiring this guy to solve?
Ah,
Is it a recruiting problem? Is it a development problem? Is it a problem getting along with the donors?
yeah. It's interesting because no one's probably perfect for the job, right? So by narrowing that down, like,
No.
does this person have the requisite strengths in those problem areas is probably a key filter.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest um, telltale signs of whether a coach is going to make it and whether the fan base will tolerate him or not. So if it's a decent fit, but he's solving a problem that they know they've got, they'll tolerate a little bit more from him than they would somebody who just walked in as Johnny White Shoes and knows everything and tells them to get out of the way.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. I mean, a lot of coaches have been in the business a long time, and we were talking earlier about the data that's available. The fan base has become so much more educated, now. I mean, they've got the statistics and the data available through all sorts of outlets these days. So it's not just quote unquote armchair quarterback. Some of these people, they know what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah, they do. What we want to focus them on is, are they looking at the right metrics?
Yeah,
You
of
can
course.
look at offensive explosiveness, or you can look at a defensive stat, and it might not be the right thing to look at for that particular situation.
Yeah.
You almost want to step back and look at the bigger picture, and then you kind of go, okay, well, this looks like the right fit. We're okay in 4 areas. We've got 2 others that we might need to work on. But if you're focused only on the 2 areas, you're going to make a mountain out of a molehill, and you might run a guy out who's a pretty decent coach.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's um, you mentioned earlier about the importance of knowing who a coach surrounds themselves with, and I'm thinking about like more of an internal hire, if you will, right? Like, how do you evaluate a coordinator who's being promoted into a head coaching role for the first time? So someone who was, in a supporting role is now being elevated. How do you get inside that?
Well, this is the area that I think the industry gets wrong more than anything else. A great coordinator is not automatically a great coach.
Right.
Those are fundamentally different jobs. As a coordinator, you own one side of the ball. As the head coach, you own everything. The other side of the ball, special teams, recruiting, NIL, the transfer portal, donor relations, media compliance, and the mental health of the team. So
Hmm.
what I look for is evidence that the coordinator has already been operating above his title. Was he involved in recruiting at a high level? Did the head coach trust him to run staff meetings or handle game day management decisions? Was he the de facto CEO of his side of the building? If the answer is yes, you've got a real candidate. If the answer is, well, he calls a great third and down package, good luck. We also see a lot of times where a coordinator will take over as the head coach, and then he'll continue to call plays on his side of the ball, and he'll hire somebody who's really strong on the other side of the ball. And I found that that's a red flag too, that you really need a head coach who's going to step back and look at the whole picture. And if they're buried in the playbook during the game, they're not paying attention to what's going on in the defense. They're not seeing the special teams hole that they've got. They've really got to be able to look at the big picture.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, a lot of this is mitigating risk, I think, in some of this because there's no single answer. But what are some of the factors that make a coaching hire feel like a safe move versus a high risk gamble?
Well, I don't know that there's a safe hire in college football anymore. With the portal, the NIL,
Yeah.
conference realignment, playoff expansions, the variables are insane. But some hires carry less structural risk than others. A safer hire coach is one whose skill set aligns with the specific problems the program needs solved. So if your issue is recruiting, you better be hiring a recruiter. If your issue is player development, hire a developer. The gamble hires are the ones where the AD falls in love with the narrative instead of solving a problem. He's an offensive genius, sounds great until you realize the program's actual issue is broken culture. And the genius never managed a locker room.
Yeah.
So the riskiest hires in college football are the ones that are made because it sounds good at a press conference and not on the field.
Yeah, that's it's fascinating. It really is. We were talking about that coordinator situation where, how many, how much responsibility, how empowered were they to do to work outside of their or above their pay grade, so to speak. What about prior head coaching experience? Let's say the school's trying to change direction in some way. How important is prior coaching experience in that scenario?
Well, it kind of depends on what change direction actually means for that program.
Hmm.
If a school has been a mess organizationally, with a lot of coaching turnover, compliance issues, dysfunction in the building, then you probably need somebody who sat in the chair before and knows how to stabilize the operation.
Mm-hmm.
But if the program is structurally sound and just needs a talent or scheme upgrade, a first-time head coach with the right profile can absolutely work. The mistake I see ADs defaulting to is experienced head coach as a safety blanket when what they really need is the right head coach, experience or not. Some of the best hires in recent history were first-timers who fit the program perfectly. And some of the worst were experienced retreads who'd already proven at their last stop they'd hit their ceiling.
Yeah. Well, you just said, program fit. I'm curious what program fit actually means when you're evaluating whether a coach will succeed.
So when you're talking about program fit, it's probably the most underrated variable in a coaching hire. And it's the one that ADs and others around the athletic department pay lip service to without actually understanding it. When we're talking about fit, we're talking about the coach's strengths and that they line up with the program's specific needs, resources, and constraints, not just the brand. So every program has a realistic ceiling based on the conference, geography, NIL infrastructure, etc. Fit means the coach understands that ceiling and knows how to maximize within it. Not a guy who's going to show up and promise a national championship at a program that hasn't won its division in a decade. The best fits I've seen are coaches who looked at the job honestly and identified 2 or 3 structural advantages the program already had and built their entire operation around exploiting those advantages. Sort of like Signetti did at Indiana.
Oh.
That's a fit.
Yeah, that's it. You find those strengths, you build on them, you build a track record, you gain support, and then you say, hey, if we really want to start cooking with gas, let's address these other issues, You start to really have a, legacy impact.
Signetti's going to be difficult to duplicate because he really lined up his ducks before he took the job. He knew which assistants were coming with him, which players could possibly come with him, what the roster already looked like. I mean, he really had laid it all out ahead of time. I don't know that you're going to find that a lot. Might be 1 or 2 every once in a while. But trying to duplicate exactly what he did is, really going to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many variables at play. It's kind of, I'm not saying once in a lifetime, but like, you're not always going to have that kind of, I guess, insight in advance to know. So, and no matter who it is, there's a search. There's always, collective organizational relief that someone got hired. And of course it's I don't want to say self-fulfilling, but you want to, hey, we've hired this person and we're excited about it, right? And of course there's positive press and reactions generated. But what are the details that you look for to see if the excitement is more than, say, skin deep?
Well, that's a good question. I try to separate the excitement from the evidence. So, fans and media get excited about names and really not plans. So I'm looking for the specifics underneath the press conference. Who are the first staff hires? That tells you everything about priorities. What's his portal and recruiting strategy in the first 72 hours? Because that's the critical time. Mm-hmm. Everything in college football today starts the second the contract's signed. So, there's no honeymoon period. And what are they doing, when they get going?
Yeah.
If I look at the Penn State job, the Penn State hire this year was really interesting. So it was, a seat of the pants dismissal. And, I don't know the whole story on the back end of that, but Pat Kraft obviously felt that he needed to make a change, and he made it very suddenly, and it shocked college football. And then the search looked like it was just out of control. Like they were turned down a number of times. And then they came up with Matt Campbell from Iowa State. So if you start to dig into the numbers behind everything and you start to look at the programs, they hired Matt Campbell, who is a clone of James Franklin. So we'll have to see how that ends up. There could be, other variables and other things that could be doing some stuff in the background and putting more money into the program, although they had a well-funded program going in that we don't know about. But it looks like they replaced one guy with the same guy.
Yeah. Interesting. There's a reason why he was attractive to them. You've met him before. We're, just a couple minutes left here, and I want to. I'll leave you with this question, I guess. Early warning signs, right? Beyond that, what are the early warning signs that tend to show up in early hires that tell you, like, this is probably not going to work out?
Well, if you see a coach who's spending more time selling vision than building the infrastructure, that's a real clear sign.
Red flag.
If it's March and the new coach has done 15 media appearances but hasn't locked down the strength and conditioning staff or his portal targets, it tells you his priorities are backwards. Another red flag is staff turnover within the first year. If the assistants are in and they're out right away, then there's something broken in the building.
Yeah.
One I've tracked closely over the years at Coach's Hot Seat is the culture and identity, but he can't articulate a specific concrete plan for how the team is going to win football games. And that's a problem. Culture matters, but without a schematic and an operational plan, it's just motivational speaking. And motivational speakers don't last long in college football.
Yeah. No, you need a plan, right? Like you said, you need an architect who can speak with some inspiration. Well, listen, we're out of time for now, but great chatting with you, Mark. Great insights, and I look forward to our next encounter.
Well, thanks, Sean. I appreciate the time.
You bet. That's it for today's episode of the Coach's Hot Seat podcast. You can find the latest rankings and analysis at coacheshotseat.com. I'm Sean O'Connor. Be sure to like, subscribe, share the show with your friends, and check back next time as we track who's moving closer to the hot seat. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.